Fine reporting. I'm joined again now by Heber Jentzsch, who is president of the Church of Scientology. Why do you go to such extraordinary lengths to stop your message getting out?
To stop our message from getting out? Oh, no, I think...
All this litigation everywhere.
Well, it's very little litigation internationally, but by the way, this internet issue is being resolved in the courts in the United States, the issue being that stolen copyrights are not allowed to be used on the internet. And Netcom, which is a major carrier, has made a ruling in the last few weeks saying that people may not steal copyrighted information. We have made a breakthrough in that area. We've been the advanced people who have had to deal with that issue. And now there are many corporations, people who write books, people who have films, people who have records that are all available on the internet, are very happy that Scientology has taken a lead in that. We put out an ad here called Trust. Okay, I think that there are people who have disagreements, and obviously a number of those people were expressing themselves there. They're a very small minority of people. But what you really find is that we must build those areas of communication. Mr. Hayworth and I have differences of opinion. We both have different feelings about each other and about how we deal with each other. And, but I think it's important that trust be built. So here's an ad which is saying, let's do something in this world. Let's build a little better world for people. And Scientologists from around the world have put money into it. We've taken 100,000 people off of drugs. Is there something wrong with that?
Let me go.
No, sir. I mean, is there something wrong with that?
Well, let me go. Let's ask. Let me go straight to Ian Hayworth. You mentioned him just now. Ian Hayworth is runs the Cult Information Centre. Now, what's wrong with the cult of Scientology, and why shouldn't it advertise on television?
Well, Judge Leahy in 1984 described Scientology as corrupt, sinister and dangerous. Strong words for a judge. And the concern I had at that time is the same concern I have today. I've been in this field for 17 years, working full-time on both sides of the Atlantic, and for 17 years I've received calls of complaint about Scientology. And I think to see an organisation that was once described in that way by Judge Leahy as corrupt, sinister and dangerous, now gaining access to television commercials, I think is rather extraordinary. And even a year ago I would have laughed at the suggestion that this might be happening. I think it's tragic.
Corrupt and dangerous. Corrupt and dangerous.
It was not a ruling.
This
was a statement and not a ruling, by the way. And in that particular case, what happened was that the wife was trying to take over the children. She did take them, and the result was 2 years ago she said, look, the children turned into drug addicts, they have lost their capability to study, and he sent them back to the father and said, use Scientology to resolve it. Now, Mr. Hayworth and I, we do have a difference of opinion. I mean, he's involved in promoting the kidnapping of people from families and so forth.
Well, that's simply not true. You know that's not true.
Well, no, I have the article.
Before we get into that, let me bring in David Mellor. Let me bring in David Mellor on the issue of advertising. I'm going to come straight back to you on this.
Let me just finish that one thing, because I understand. No, let me just finish one thing.
Yep.
I think...
Very briefly.
It's very important, Mr. Hayworth, that trust be developed, because if there's distrust, and there has to be a basis for trust. We've never met, and you've said horrible things about my religion. I would defend to the death your right to have your religion. I don't know what it is, but you have a right to have that religion, and I think it's important that other people also have that right.
Okay, David Mellor, now you were responsible for the legislation that actually allowed religion to be advertised on television. Why are you unhappy that Scientology should be advertised now?
Well, I mean, I was the minister that took the Broadcasting Act 1990 through the House of Commons. There was quite a strong evangelical lobby in both houses who had influence with ministers more senior than me, who agreed that it was appropriate to remove the restriction on religious advertising. I have to say that I was always rather suspicious of this. I think that rather naively those who campaigned for the change assumed it would be fairly bland British Christian messages that we put across. I'm afraid I rather more cynically, and being aware of America, religious television in America, alien cults like Scientology, thought that they would try and exploit this. And indeed, there's been very little religious advertising on television in the 7 years since the Act was passed. But now we have the Scientologists, and I think it's a bad thing, quite frankly, that their advertising is available, albeit on 2 very marginal satellite channels.
What, John Wadham, Director of Liberty, do you think about this? I mean, should there be limits on the kind of advertisements that we should be subjected to on television?
Scientology may be crap claptrap, but I mean the reality is that it's for us to decide what we think about religion. So it's for us to make our own decisions, our own mind up about that, and it's not for the state to intervene to tell us what we should see, what we shouldn't see. And I think that there's a basic right of freedom of expression that everyone must have, and that although there may be problems with Scientology, those should be dealt with. Actually,
Scientology has been denied religious status in Britain for years and years. I think Lord Denning was one of the first people to make a very strong ruling and say, no, this can't be seen as a religion under any circumstances. Even if it was granted religious status at some point in time, surely religious freedom should not become religious license to do anything in the name of one faith or another.
There are laws that are violated. There are ways to deal with that, Mr. Hayworth, and of course that is a situation where I think, again, Scientology has done a great deal. We've taken 100,000 people off of drugs. How many people is your organization? I don't know how many your church has done, but I think it's great if your church has done that sort of thing. I don't know whether you take people off of drugs. We've restored over 2 million people's education.
The work I'm involved in is handling the calls, picking up the pieces associated with families that call us. Because of the problems created by Scientology and other organizations, and a disproportionate number of the calls come from people like...
Look, I understand that you have an obviously...
You've been involved in Scientology.
You have an obvious different viewpoint, and
it's not a case of a viewpoint. I'm representing
let me respond to the good minister here for a second. Minister, regardless of how you may feel about my religion, I appreciate the fact that you
I'm not talking about a religious issue.
No, I'm just talking about the minister here. I appreciate the fact that you forged ahead and that you created a possibility for people to express themselves religiously. And I think it is a difference. Yes, you may have problems with Scientology. We've never met. I don't know what you ran into. But let me just say that, again, that's why trust is important. That's why you build trust. That's why communication is important. With a world that is falling apart, where I was at the United Nations last week.
David Mellor, just before we end, David Mellor, do you think there's any risk or danger in line with this?
I think hearing this deeply sinister person with a combination of soft blandishments and what appears to be underlying threats to those who don't like him, I bitterly regret that Parliament took the decision that it did, and I personally think that if Parliament had been aware that people like the Scientologists would be the first to take advantage of this, Parliament would change its mind. And I don't think it'll be many more appearances from people like him before Parliament will consider this matter again.
Yes. You have a right to your opinion, and I'm sorry we've never met. Call me deeply sinister. I regret that you feel that way, but I think that every person has a right to be what they are and to express their religion and their religious belief.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you all very much. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. That's where we have to leave, I'm afraid. A quick look at the...